in many regards, and it permeates the culture today. And so it's one of those places that I was unfamiliar to me. I didn't grow up here, but I moved here in 1998, and I really embraced it. I raised my family here, and I'm really excited. I think we could be a test case, and there are other cities like this moving forward, into the new century and trying to establish a future for humanity and for ecology, and a harmonious one.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I vote yes on everything you've said, Peter Schwartzman. One of the realities, and it may not have been as distinct as it was here. I'm in LA, in the Hollywood area, which is where I'm sitting right now. And when the pandemic started, the Trader Joe's, for instance, you probably don't have one there.
Not in Galesburg, but Illinois, but yeah.
Yeah, you've heard of them. It's a grocery store, like a Jewel or something, but it's a little more, you get a little more organic choice, and the price is pretty good. So I'm using it as an example. Day 2 of when the pandemic officially happened, and Wall Street was starting to crumble and melt, we had people lined up for 4 hours to be able to go in and buy the single can of chicken broth that was left on the shelves. That's the reality. Now, I'm in an urban setting, and what that means is there is no way to bring in more food, and there is no more food to be brought in, which means you will literally starve to death if they can't figure it out, and there is no figuring it out. You live in a place where you never have to have that happen, ever. And you're the answer to the rest of us, too. So it makes Galesburg way bigger than just the community it thinks it is. It is the answer to humanity. It is a magnificent place, which, if it's self-supporting, it can also be prosperous by helping the rest of us out, so we're not just screwed by trucks that can't get there, etc.
Well, it's amazing for you to talk. I mean, it's because you do. I'm voting for you. I'm voting yes as well for you, because I think, I didn't know that. I grew up in Washington, D.C. area. I actually went to college in the Claremont colleges, not too far from LA, right? So you may not have known that. So I spent 4 years there, and I left California because I just couldn't deal with all the highways. It just was too much for me. And then there was a couple of earthquakes I had to deal with as well. And I was
other than that, the mudslides and wildfires.
Well, yeah, you add that to the mix, right? But I still go back there, and I still have friends there. And I enjoy going back to California. I don't know, but long story short, you're right in a way. I mean, I think there is something about the heartland, and there's something about the industriousness of human beings. And I would say it has to be everywhere, right? It's not the solutions that work in Galesburg, some of which can be transplanted and used elsewhere, but every group, every society is going to have to come up with some of their own solutions. The weather is going to be different, right? And with climate change, that's even going to vary. With the fires you have, fortunately, we're not dealing with that, but that's another challenge that you endure. You have water issues, clearly, in many parts of California. And how are you going to grow things without water? Well, I mean, desalination is a possibility if we have solar energy to provide that, right? So, and I would also point out, like, the integration. We talk about food and energy as separate entities, but in fact, they could be very easily integrated. I mean, they are integrated. Think about how food grows, right? The sun comes out and the food grows. And that was, and food for everyone, not just human beings, right? That's what plants are. And then everything higher up. I feel like I'm doing a lecture in my intro class, but the point is,
a lot of people, it's like, really?
Yeah, I mean, I know, but it is. It's like, this is how it works, folks. So let's like learn from nature. And let's pick the good examples that work, and let's move forward with them and make them productive for humans as well, and without destroying the environment. And I think it's, you're talking about the soil in Galesburg being so great, which it is, but there is a way, we know, through composting on a large scale to create incredible organic, nutritious soil everywhere, right? It doesn't have to be just in Galesburg. That was a natural phenomenon. But with human, we have all this waste, organic waste that we just generally throw in a landfill. Well, if we do more composting on a large scale, we can produce soil that will grow everywhere. And one thing I'm jealous of, I know in Los Angeles, I have friends, they have fig trees there. I mean, I love a really good fig. I mean, you could literally eat figs for breakfast for several months. I remember visiting a relative there, and so I wish I could have fig trees. It's still a little bit too cold in Galesburg for fig trees. But what I learned is you can have persimmon trees here. You can have pawpaw trees. I have actually 2 that I'm growing from infancy. I didn't even know what a pawpaw was, but I'd heard about it in the history books. And then I went to
trees. You can have peach trees there.
Well, peach trees, apricots, apples. There's about 5 hours north of here in northern East Iowa, there's a place called Seed Savers. And on their property, they literally have a hillside with 800 different varieties of apples. They have apples that taste like watermelons. Okay. They have apples that are so hard that they can sit and like just mature for months after they're harvested. Okay. It's fascinating, right? So the biology brings us this wealth of nutritious food, and yet we have people who are malnourished, both globally and nationally, right? So there's something that's not computing, and it's just a matter of coming to terms with it and working together. So we see people doing this. COVID did, as you mentioned, did stimulate people to start planting trees for the future. A tree's not going to produce fruit the first year it grows, but 5 years from now it will, 10 years from now it will, 30 years from now it will. And so we have to think on those timescales in order to survive, to thrive, to feed our children, feed our grandchildren.
And I'm going to throw something in here, Peter Schwartman, because there are also economic realities that may or may not unfold this way, but the government can only run these massive multi-trillion-dollar printing presses with, no GDP to compete with the debt that's rising. So at some point, we're all going to be, let's just say, more at the self-serve pump than we have ever known. And those who have thought about that and made those moves, like you said, the sun is free, the water is free, the soil is already there. The rest of us don't have this. You guys can really be in great shape if they just follow the basic common sense of their grandparents, which is how the grandparents lived, even composting back then, that gave the soil that's there today for free with free sun and free rain.
Well, I'll give you an example. It's so poignant what you're saying. Engineering, right? Amazing field, done incredible things and demonstrable, visible things. We can have people living, 100 stories up. We can build bridges across some of the largest waterways that we know of, right? And we can build tunnels under giant water. I mean, these are amazing feats of engineering. But frankly, like for instance, we have stormwater issues throughout the country, okay? How are we going to deal with stormwater? Well, why do we have stormwater issues now that are so much worse than we had before? Well, because we've paved everything, right? So we've made impermeable structures everywhere, and then we wonder why we have a runoff problem. So how do we deal with the runoff problem? We build more structures made of concrete to take the water away. And do you know how expensive that is? I mean, both in terms of money and in terms of physical substance. It's huge. Concrete is a very expensive thing, and it's heavy and to transport it, and it's also it's very damaging to the climate. It's a major contributor to CO2 production. A lot of people don't realize that. How about thinking again, looking outside? How does nature deal with this problem? How did it deal with the problem? Why didn't we have runoff issues 50 years ago? Trees absorb huge amounts of water. So let's plant some more trees. Trees will produce fruit or food for other living things, but they also will provide a stormwater runoff plan that is sustainable and a lot cheaper than huge infrastructure of concrete and subterranean tunnels and all this other nonsense, in my opinion. Now, I know that may come across as progress to some, right? Antiquated. I'll give you another example. Guess what? People don't know this, and I have an opportunity to share it with you. In the early 1920s, Galesburg had a electric public trolley system. And we were the first city in the entire United States that was targeted by a multi conglomerate forces of industry to get rid of it. Because the individualized car was the answer. And public transportation that was inexpensive and easy to get to and accessible and enjoyable was to be gone. And so they targeted Galesburg. No one alive in Galesburg remembers that, but we have pictures to prove it. We have historians have written it down. And I would say that that is the answer to our transportation problems. We spend incredible amounts of money on roads. Everyone's complaining about how bad the roads are. And I agree, the roads are they're causing destruction to our cars and our trucks, and we can't afford to pay for the roads, and we can't afford to fix our cars. So if that's the case, what do you do about it? Do we just keep pouring money that we don't have into trying to solve the problem, like putting a square peg in a round hole? Now, admittedly, I don't know who's going to see this before the election, and so I'm not about like getting rid of roads, tomorrow. But I think we have to plan for a future where we can get downtown. Downtown is a mile from me. Why do I have to have an individualized car to get there? Why can't I just hop on the trolley that's solar powered and get there in 5 minutes?
I'm going to
It's
jump
simple,
in,
right?
Peter Schwartzman, because, and I know we sound like each other's fan club, but why not? And we've never met before. So let's pull the camera back.
No.
We're looking at Galesburg. It's disappeared in Illinois. We pull the camera back, and we're going to now move over to Europe, and we're going to move the camera in, and we're going to look at a European city, and we're going to see slick, beautiful trolleys. And I mean, people can't conceive of them because they've never seen what these look like, but oh my God. And guess what? They don't have the traffic jams. They don't have the problem, and people ride them. And here in LA, none of us would ride public transportation. Well, because, and I have a Range Rover, and, why would I? Are you kidding? Back in the 1920s, so it was the same time as Galesburg. And most people, or many people, have seen the movie Chinatown with young Jack Nicholson. And in that movie, it recreated LA of the 1920s. It had the most advanced public transportation in the world. We had cable cars and trolleys where you could go from downtown LA to the Pacific Ocean to the beach in 20 minutes for a nickel. And all of that, exactly as you were saying, in the 1950s and 60s, General Motors got together with Firestone. Firestone makes 4 rubber tires for each General Motors car, and they bought up all the trolleys and everything, and most of them are still sitting on barges in Long Beach, half sunk into the ocean. And America's first suburb was built on purpose in Studio City, and where you had to physically drive a car to it with a carport, and you could go into the garage from there, blah, blah, blah. So all of this was cynically done on purpose, when they knew, just like everyone else knew, the best way to get people from A to B fast is from A to B fast. And if I remember my geometry, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And you're talking about not getting rid of the freeways, but just bringing back the straight lines.
Exactly. That's exactly. We have so many straight lines in Galesburg. And even some of our neighboring communities who can't get to the hospitals. We have 2 wonderful hospitals in Galesburg, and people in the neighboring communities can't get to the hospital. If they don't have a car or they can't drive, they can't get to the hospital. I mean, it's absurd, right? In emergency situations, we fly helicopters to these places. That's extremely
the millionaires
expensive.
that get sick.
Well, yeah, it's right. It's right. So it's not practical. It's unsustainable. Trolley system works extremely well. Rail is a great way to travel. We do have Amtrak that comes through Galesburg, and people know how efficient that is and how quickly we get to Chicago without the like you said, without the traffic, without the pollution, without the headaches, without all the commotion. You can sit, relax, read, sleep, meet new people on Amtrak. That's what you can do in a trolley too. You get to know your neighbors. When you're into individualized cars, you don't know anybody. In fact, you're probably flipping each other off, or you're on your freaking phone. How many people are getting in accidents and dismember, all kinds of horrible things are happening to them because they're so stuck to this. When they're driving, they're texting, they're listening, and we need to get free people's hands off the wheel, frankly, to bring a safety to our communities. I feel, and so why not? Why not? I mentioned this. I'm not running on this per se. I didn't mention trolley cars in any of my literature that I'm circulating in the community. But seriously though, what's to stop us? What's to prevent us from doing that?
Well, here's a question, Peter Schwartzman. So I'm in West Hollywood. We had all the rails, all the tracks were still buried under the regular pavement. All they did was pave over it. So our city council was toying with the idea of just re-exposing the tracks.
Wow.
And then getting some of these trolleys that are half sunk in the ocean and just stick them back on the tracks. There, done. I'll bet in Galesburg under the tarmac are probably a lot of rails. Maybe much of the infrastructure pre-exists.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, frankly. I really don't. You don't know. But it is. There's a lot of metal.
I'm just saying, what a cool thing. If it's still there and it's still usable, then half the problem is solved. And
I can tell you that the city itself has not grown very much, like physically. So in terms of the structural needs, it wouldn't be much more. And the capacity is undeniable. We have a bus system which runs, and we have trouble keeping it going because the ridership isn't as strong as it could be for some of the same reasons. Ridership is next to none in parts of Los Angeles. But it's an attitude change. As you mentioned, right? Europe. I'm so glad you used that example, because those of us who've had an opportunity to go to Europe and see it, it's not the Jetsons show. It's not some surrealistic video that like Avatar. It's actually real, right? It's something that's in place. The pedestrian nature of many European cities is what attracts us to go there in the first place. Why can we not create that here?
Europe looks like Munchkin land because they haven't been they do. They think it's some kind of medieval thing where people are tossing dung in buckets out of their windows.
Well, that's the Hobbit and so forth.
Right. It's not a Monty Python sketch. It's like very like groovy and clean, and it's just great. And the fact is, many of us came from there once upon a time, and we left a really good system. But what we don't know is we were poured gallons of Kool-Aid by General Motors and Firestone and trained to think that only bad people don't have cars, 2.7 cars, by the way, or whatever it is. So
it goes 0 to 60 in 5 seconds.
Yeah, because what happened, show me a road in LA where I can go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and not kill 20 people in front of me and get a ticket. It's never going to happen. It's a fantasy. And it probably is everywhere else downtown. So you're running for mayor. Let's get out your vitals here so the people can research you.
Okay, I roll my sleeve up.
Yeah, roll your sleeve up.
Get a check for my heart pressure, my blood pressure, and
your website, your Twitter handle, whatever you want to give out.
Well, Peter Schwartzman for Mayor is the website, but it is what it is. I had some local folks do it, and they did a nice job with it. But I figured, the real social media is more, unfortunately, in some regards, Facebook. So there's a lot more there on Facebook. I have an Instagram account that you can find with the same Peter Schwartzman for Mayor. I also have a Twitter account. I'm not using as much as I was maybe earlier on. I found that the best way to get people out to vote is to literally knock on their door and hand them my flyer and say, look, I hope to be your mayor, and you should know what I look like. I'm wearing a mask, so it is somewhat limiting, but check me out. And I'm at your door because, again, I believe that we can do this. I believe the good old boys system can go away. There's a lot of people who are frustrated with it. When government only serves a very small section of the population, then it's not doing its job. That's not what government was made for. That's not what democracy is about. We had less than 20% of the public turnout last time for the mayoral race. I'm hoping to double that. I think if I do, then I'm pretty confident about what's going to happen. When I talk to people, I have no doubt feel that I have the support. And it's, again, I don't want to make this about me, but I mean, this idea that we can do things differently. We can be accountable. We can be transparent to the people. There's so many things that we do as government that people don't know anything about because we've never taught them. We've never spent the time to try to teach them. We've not communicated it in a way that they understand. We've not made the effort. And it's unfortunate because, of course, we are just, as I see myself really as a public servant, and that's my job. That's my job. That's why I do what I do. I'm not, I have a full-time job on top of that. So it is a part-time, service, but it's something I give willingly and happily. And I hope as mayor to serve in that capacity in a greater way.
Okay, well, I'll end by saying if we don't think that people really do want this, and they do, we never would have seen such a meteoric rise of people like Bernie Sanders who are speaking the truth of 90% of America. So people do want clean water and breathable air and a decent education for their kids and streets they can run around on without having to worry about being shot at and all of that. And, you got to have humanity first, and that's your position. Peter Schwartman, thank you so much for spending time with me and allowing me to make a new friend. I was
wonderful
anticipating that part, but I vote yes.
Okay, I vote yes as well. So thank you. No, this has been marvelous. It's, you are part of the media that really is doing what the media needs to do, right? The media needs to serve the people. It needs to get the word out, and that's what you're doing. And I am so impressed with the independent media, and I hope maybe you can launch, or you or someone could launch an independent media in Galesburg after I become mayor, because we need a means to communicate more broadly than many media forms do.
Well, I'm going to just jump on that. Here we keep threatening to close this off, but we both obviously like to talk. I'm actually working with the United Nations right now. It's called the Model United Nations, and it's for kids. So it is literally the United Nations, but they have to be between 14 and like 17. And they use all the same protocols, but their job is to rethink everything and solve all the world's problems, because they're stuck here for 70 or 80 more years. We all know that. So they've got real skin in the game. That said, we're putting together a radio show that will air on independent radio stations that are the voices of these kids. I'll bet you've got some smart kids in Galesburg that we could bring onto this and get you guys involved as well.
Well, that'd be awesome. Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely. That would be a great opportunity. I'm so impressed with young people. I mean, they come in with open minds, and obviously they could, they're smart. They can see what the problems are. They don't need to be told. They don't need to be dictated to. They can see it, and they know there's a better future for them and for humanity. So no, to the extent that we can help, please let me know, and I'll try to recruit some folks. I have two daughters who are in that age range, by the way. And so, you might get two volunteers right there.
Listen,
but,
the more
beyond my family.
So absolutely. Well, what a great conversation. Check out Peter Schwartman. If you want to have a mayor that actually cares about you, then that would be your choice. You can choose to have a mayor that doesn't care about you, and then you can continue to have 40 more years of pain and suffering. So that's all I have to say on that. Okay. Thank you so much, Peter Schwartman.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you. Bye.
All right. See you.